Well, good morning. Good morning. I am getting things started this morning. I hope that everyone had an awesome weekend. And if you are watching this live, make sure you comment and let us know, right? That would be awesome, right? So this morning, I want to talk about some hard stuff, because I think that a lot of people are going through some hard stuff. And that is not always easy to, I guess, talk about. So this morning, I want to talk about our feelings and how we handle those feelings and what we do about those feelings. Because I think we all have situations that cause us to feel deeply, right? Situations in life when it simply doesn't make sense as to why we're going through it. Sure, we can remind ourselves that God is in control and that all things work together for good. I remind myself of those scriptures all the time and think about the scriptures that tell me that God is in control and that all things work together for good. We can meditate on how our understanding is limited and that God's perspective is so different from ours. And we can say that God has a purpose for the pain. But it really doesn't stop us from wanting to know, why is it happening? From wanting it to make sense when it simply doesn't make sense. Are you following me on this? Does this resonate with anyone? Right now, in this very moment, in my immediate family, we're experiencing a doesn't make any sense moment. We've been praying and we've been asking God for miracles, but the family has already begun some funeral arrangements for my cousin's 3-year-old granddaughter, who's been battling cancer for over a year. In April, we saw a miracle and we rejoiced in seeing her body completely clearing of all cancer and all tumors. But in July, we saw the cancer attacking her again, stronger than before. And now, no matter how hard we seem to pray for a miracle, for her to be restored back to health, it seems that God has another plan for our family and for this baby. It really doesn't matter what the news is, right? It could be a situation like I'm explaining to you that we're dealing with right now. Or it could be that your boss tells you that you're no longer needed and that you're being let go. Or your spouse is telling you that they want a divorce, or your application for a position that you really, really want gets denied. Or maybe you're failing the test for the promotion for the 10th time. Maybe you get news of an accident that takes the life of your loved one unexpectedly. Maybe you experience a miscarriage or several miscarriages. Maybe you get a report from the doctor yourself that says that you have cancer, or you get a bill that you can't pay. Maybe you learn that your spouse is cheating. Or maybe you're going through a situation where addiction to alcohol or drugs or pornography is destroying your relationship. I think you get my point. I don't want to dwell on all of these negative things, but these are things that simply don't make sense when we're going through them in that moment. Because if God is who he really is, if he is who he says he is, then why does he allow these things to happen? Especially if we are doing all the right things according to scripture, according to his word, right? Well, let me kind of dig into that a little bit. The simple answer is this. We are looking at things from a human perspective instead of a spiritual one. Our eyes are on the physical situation and they're not on the eternal destination. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." We have to recognize that the way we've learned to process things and the way we've learned to deal with things in our lives is completely polar opposite from God's way of doing things. Our expectations create limitations. Let me say that again. Our expectations in any way, shape, or form create limitations. When we expect God to behave in a certain way so that it makes sense to us, we limit our belief in him. When we expect for an outcome to take place based upon our personal experiences and our rational way of thinking, we limit God to perform miracles. You see, my human mind says, I want this baby to be completely healed of cancer. I want doctors to be completely amazed and dumbfounded by the fact that she has completely been cured here on earth. I want that. That's the outcome, the expectation that I expect from my prayers. And when it doesn't look like it's coming together in the way that I expect it to, I start to doubt God. I start to doubt his power. I start to doubt the scripture that I read that says the power of that there's power in prayer of the righteous one. That when you believe and you ask for it, that it will come to pass. I start to doubt that. And that is because I have an expectation for the outcome instead of actually trusting and believing that God is in control. So, if I focus on the circumstances, if I focus on the pain that the parents are feeling, the pain that our entire family is feeling. I mean, literally 10 to 15 years ago, another one of my cousins from that exact same family lost his 5-year-old to cancer. So my human perspective is, God, why are we suffering like this? Why are we going through this again? And while scripture can be helpful, I don't really think it's the answer here. And I know that sounds really funny coming from me, but I don't think it's the exact answer. I think what we have to do is we have to shift our perspective in this moment. We have to take our human perspective and our human thought, and we have to shift that to our belief and our trust in God. And we can't just speak the scripture over the situation and expect for it to give us peace. I can't just simply say, well, God, you said this and now it's not happening and I don't get it, because that puts an expectation on God, and we cannot do that. We have to absolutely 100% take our expectations off the table, take our agenda off the table, and allow God to be God. This doesn't mean that the scripture that we read is not true, because it is. What it means is that we have to get more in alignment with who God is and his character so that we can see things from an eternal perspective, from God's perspective, instead of our perspective. So how do we do this, right? So when we're having these feelings and when we're thinking about these things, how do we do this? Well, I want you to think right now about the words that you would choose to describe God's character. What are some words that you would use to describe God's character? So I'm going to share with you some that I think about. He's faithful. He's just. He's omniscient. He's omnipotent. Omnipotent, I should say. Omnipresent. He's sovereign. He's trustworthy. He's good. He's merciful. He never changes. He's loving. Can you think of some more? You see, when I start to speak these words, when I start to say these words over the situation, and I remind myself of who God is, it changes my perspective. When I remember the stories of trial and tribulation in Scripture, from Abraham to Joseph to Job to the trials and tribulations of Paul, and so many other characters in that story, I can lean more into God's character, and that starts to calm my spirit, and my need to understand why starts to fade a little bit. Just try that for a second. But God is powerful. He's all-knowing. He's all-powerful. He's faithful. He's good. He's loving. He's just. He cares for me. He provides for me. You see, nothing is out of his reach. I said yesterday, or I sent out a text yesterday in my daily text group, that, God doesn't work with us one by one. He works with all of us all at the same time, because that's how God is. He can do that. We tend to put God in a box and we make him small according to what our minds can think or believe. And that puts those limitations on God's ability to do great things for us. Nothing is out of his reach. Nothing is lost. He's a redeemer of time, and he is a provider of all things, and especially peace. There's nothing that he allows or does that is meant to intentionally hurt us or destroy us. His purpose and his will are always at work. So it's an increase in our belief and trust in his character that has to happen in these moments, not a repetition of scripture. Because, like I said, sometimes we read the scripture and we're like, well, if you said this, then why isn't it happening? If your word said this, then you're not doing this. We're putting an expectation in a place that we don't have a right to. When we go into our feelings, when we start to really look at how we feel about all of the things that are happening to us in this world, when we start to really dig into those feelings, because that's what the world tells us to do. Feel it. You've got to tell people how you feel. You've got to really, really acknowledge your feelings and bring them out. When we allow ourselves to really just dig into those feelings, all we do is complicate the process, and we take God out of the picture, because we start to see things more and more and more and more from a human perspective instead of from an eternal destination. When we focus more on God and who he is in the situation, when we take our thoughts and feelings, and instead of going to a person with them, we take those thoughts and feelings to God, and we ask him, what do I do with this? I don't like the way I'm feeling. I don't understand. And we get more in alignment with his character of who he is. And we see him for the God that he is. Then we change our perspective. This isn't easy, and I'm not suggesting that it is, but I am telling you that it is the answer. I hope that something that I said this morning encourages you and lets you know that no matter what you're going through, no matter what challenge you are faced with, that our God never changed. He's still the same. He's still in control. He sees it all. And we have to remember that his ways and his thoughts are so opposite ours. We are never going to fully understand or know what God is doing. But if we remind ourselves of who he is, and we remind ourselves of the fact that he is who he says he is, and we just don't necessarily see what we want to see. If we take those expectations off the table, the agenda that we have off the table, and we say, God, you are God, and your purpose and your will are always at play. And I will walk in that truth. I will walk in that place. Then the hard stuff that we get hit with starts to become easier because we're actually opening ourselves up to receive what God has for us. God always does the how, and we have to do the do. I wish you a great day. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Take care.